channel. If you're new, welcome. I am the Dark Light Emissary, and this video is going to briefly cover a few reasons why I love the Warhammer universe and why I think it's worth getting into. Overall, the main encompassing reason that I really enjoy this universe for is that I just love the uncompromised feeling of this universe. I don't mean that in the stereotypical, it's over the top, everything's to the max, which it kind of is for Warhammer. That's kind of one of its main draws is, here's a really big weapon in one universe. Well, Warhammer made it that much bigger and more ridiculous. Let's turn the lever up to 10, break the lever off, and keep it there. That's a lot of what Warhammer is kind of known for, but I'm talking about a little bit of a deeper reasoning for why I like it. My goal in this video is to not try to be super exhaustive with it. My goal right now with these videos is to get them to you in about 17 to 20 minutes. That seems to be doing the best right now for some discovery and algorithm's sake, and anything longer than that seems to have a steep fall off right now. But anyway, I digress. So the main core thing that I've always enjoyed about Warhammer is that it is uncompromising in attitude. And what do I mean by that? So one of the main things, the main protagonist in Warhammer is probably the Imperium of mankind, right? It's the human point of view. We have the most characters that are human because we know how to write human characters because we are humans, right? So despite the tens of thousands of years that this is supposed to take place from now, we can kind of do our best to glean what humans might think like there, given the circumstances these humans live under in that era. And if you spend any amount of time in any Warhammer social media group, you're going to get the inevitable. If you say that you love Warhammer, you're going to get someone that comes out of the woodwork to be like, yeah, but remember the Imperium is awful and you should hate them, and because they're an awful government, they represent awful things, and all that's true. It's not like the Imperium of mankind is some great heroic entity for humanity in the setting. That's why I like it. I like their attitude, and I like that they are this unapologetically more ancient, evil version of humanity compared to so many other settings. If you look at something like Star Wars, for the most part, Mass Effect, you take your pick for universes. Star Trek, a big one too. I would say that in those universes, mankind is kind of portrayed as this plucky adventurer style race that, gets the job done through, a bit of grit, but also diplomacy usually, and a lot of hand-wringing. That's kind of the Star Trek thing, right? Oh gosh, we can't just obliterate these guys. We got to figure out what we need to do to appease them and make everyone happy. That's kind of, and I know that Star Trek gets a bit deeper than that. It's a bit more philosophical, and that's fine. But I think it's sort of refreshing to have humanity kind of be semi-villainous to villain the status as also a giant empire. It's not a sub-faction of humanity that's evil. That's often the case in a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. You have the sub-faction of evil humans. You have the good faction of humans that are at rivals with each other, rival morals. But no, in Warhammer, humanity has congealed into this very bitter, angry, old empire, and it's got a lot of weapons, a lot of technology, and, if you were to run into them, they're probably not going to be too thrilled to run into you, and they're probably not going to let you live very long if you make yourself a nuisance, a big enough nuisance in their eyes, whether it's in the Great Crusade era or in the 40k era. Although you might be a little bit lucky in the 40k era because humanity is a bit spread out and disorganized, despite being this kind of ancient, angry empire. It takes a while for them to muster any sort of focus towards a threat. The Tau, for example, can consider themselves lucky due to this kind of trait that the Imperium kind of intrinsically has as part of itself. And I like that humanity is like this, and that you find this empire like this. They're ancient, they seem evil, they seem very angry about something. And if you were to dig deeper, you learn that they're fighting an even greater evil in an alternate dimension of thirsting Lovecraftian gods who, by the way, corrupted half of their standing forces millennia ago, and now they run around liking to wear the faces of their victims as they chant about evil gods, as they try to bring down the rest of their descendants, that they abandoned millennia ago. Like, all of that together is just a great setup in general for me. And I was always kind of surprised that humans were not, like, portrayed as this hand-wringing, good golly gosh, plucky species. They were kind of given the senior role in the setting. Of course, you've got way more ancient aliens and, other forces in the setting, such as the Necrons and Eldar and things like that. So it's not like humanity is old on that level. But I would say, as far as a lot of, like, more popular sci-fi based settings and a lot of fantasy-based settings, it's a pretty old amount of time for humanity to have lived as a single empire, if you think about it, compared to a lot of that stuff. Like, in Mass Effect, humans have not been around that long, I believe, in the galactic space, and in Star Wars, I think they have been, but, like, and, in Star Wars, you have humans like the Emperor and Darth Vader. I mean, there have been evil humans in that, but I would say, I would put some money on betting that most are kind of, like, the species of humanity doesn't really stand out in Star Wars, which actually I would say is a plus, but again, I digress. I'm not here to talk about Star Wars. My point is that oftentimes I feel like a lot of, not just humans, but species in general in Star Wars are kind of portrayed in a neutral to good light, and that's the thing about Warhammer that I like, is if you don't like humanity for how they are in the setting, that's fine, but there's not too much else to really like. I mean, maybe you can like the Tau, and the Tau have their own problems, but the Eldar are pretty scary. The Necrons certainly are. The Orcs, I don't really need to say anything, do I? Like, you've got this dark corner, you got this dark empire, but they're fighting greater darkness around them at all sides, It might be the bloodiest regime humanity's ever seen, but they are trying to hold back things like the Drukhari, raiding parties who come from an entire dimension of darkness, which is Kamarog. They're fighting against aliens like the Sloth, which are like these maggot men creature things that turn humans into flesh golem biomechanical monstrosities. They're fighting enslavers that sometimes come out of the warp. They're fighting the Tyranid swarm, coming from the galaxy itself, coming from outside the galaxy, I should say, trying to consume everything and everyone in their path. They're fighting so much. And that's the thing, too. Humanity is sort of a victim in Warhammer, but it's also very powerful, despite its wounded and slowly failing setting for itself. It's kind of in a death spiral from the time of the Great Crusade. At the Emperor's fall, it started declining, but that being said, it's still an empire with a lot of powerful potential, and it often wields that in a very inefficient but brutal, bludgeoning sort of way that I just appreciate. I just like it. I think it's really kind of funny because in so much, humanity is facing this one great evil, and if they don't stop this one great evil, then everything's done. They're done. And for the Imperium of Mankind in Warhammer, that's kind of a Tuesday, right? You got the Tyranids. It's going to be the end of the world for this one world on that day, but that's Tuesday. We'll get them on Wednesday, Bob. Let's go set up shop over there to try to redirect the swarm into Orc space. Yep, we'll get them there. They're fighting the Tyranids alone, which are its own existential doom. You've got the forces of chaos, which are their own an existential doom. You've got so much existential crisis and doom in Warhammer that, that's kind of getting to the over-the-top part of it that I, again, kind of respect and enjoy that they just go for it, because so much other things, like when I watch it, it feels so small in comparison. It's this one specific linchpin that if you don't, again, I'll use Star Wars as an example from the latest movie. Rise of Skywalker, you know. It's infamous now for many great reasons, and that I won't get into, but the one thing I'm going to bring up is near the end, you have all these Star Destroyers, right? Just massive fleet of ships. But they're all being controlled by one control antenna, and if you blow that up for some reason, these Star Destroyers can't fly anymore, can't navigate out of the atmosphere. Capital ships can't move. Like, what's the point of that? Like, you could say that humanity in Warhammer has the Golden Throne and Terra is kind of that sort of thing, but I think that even if Terra fell, and I think the Emperor would come back, for one, which would spell a doom for the Chaos Gods, possibly. He might decide, you know, maybe the Dark King was a good idea, and again, turn into a god of vengeance and just obliterate them. We don't know that for sure, but, you know, if Terra fell, it would be bad, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't be a simple one point of failure is my point. Like, you can't go into the Imperium and go find, you know, some hidden vent somewhere to like fire a missile into, and yay, you've beaten this entire empire. The Imperium of Man, it's like punching dead weight, you know, like punching a slumped over, very big, unhealthy, monstrous individual. They might be unhealthy, they might be ugly, they might be everything you abhor, but it's going to absorb your punches. That's the Imperium in a nutshell, and I kind of just respect that a ton for a setting to depict humanity as, since it's pretty rare in other stuff to see. And so, you know, I just think it's okay, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's okay to have an evil protagonist. I think we get worried about portraying groups we're seeing the perspective from as anything but good, but and sometimes we stray into anti-hero territory, and you could say a lot of human characters in Warhammer are more anti-hero than villain. And you can say that within the Imperium, you know, there's a lot of characters within the Imperium that are just doing the best to live their lives. I think a great example of that are the Tanith First and Only books, and, you know, like those soldiers, you know, they're fighting for a regime that they don't really have a choice other than to fight. Their chances at rebellion, like if they were to try to rebel for like some greater cause of some kind, then that just isn't going to happen with, again, how kind of immense and powerful the Imperium is. Rebellions don't often work out that well. There probably are some isolated groups. There are, actually, but they're just kind of far in between. And so, you know, these Tanith soldiers, they're out and fighting because, again, they're fighting way worse things. They're fighting the forces of chaos a lot of the times, and sometimes aliens, and, you know, none of which really want to brook any sort of diplomacy with the Imperium. They want to obliterate all of them to the last man. If anything, it's sort of the World War II type of setup in some ways. World War II had a clear quote-unquote good side and quote-unquote bad side. Not quote-unquote. There was definitely a bad side. Let me take that back. There was definitely an absolute bad side, but my point is, even the good guys in that setting in World War II absolutely obliterated entire cities. You know, they were doing what they needed to do to knock out an even greater evil than the evils they were perpetuating to fight that evil. And I often feel like a lot of the situations that individual forces in Warhammer are doing the same thing. You know, like the Tanith, for example, you know, they're all just kind of regular soldiers. You know, like they have families, they have lives outside of just the fighting. When they go on rest, they're just sitting around playing card games and kind of just, you know, having children even, you know, having a family and stuff. And, you know, they aren't thinking, oh man, I really can't wait to get back to the glory of the Imperium, you know, to like march its influence onwards, you know, to praise the Emperor. You know, they don't care. Like if you were to ask any of the Tanith, as long as you weren't an Inquisitor, they don't care, is my guess. They just care that they get paid and that they get to live another day, you know? And I think that is the majority of human forces in the Imperium, unless we're talking about Space Marines, Inquisitors, you know, people and forces in the elite parts of the Imperium tend to be a bit more fanatical, but a lot of the ground pounders, a lot of the main soldiers and workers in that regime are, are the regular people. And I like when we get to see the perspectives from some of them versus just the elite troops. However, like I said, it's kind of fun to just see Space Marines go punch a bunch of even more scary and evil things in the face. And, them not showing any fear and them just being this, consummate elite force that's like, yeah, that's evil and that's scary looking, but we're going to kill it. I like that. I like that there's not like, oh my gosh, what is that? I'm going to run away like I'm in a horror movie. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. I'm going to run away and act like I have no way to fight this thing. And I love horror movies, but that always bugs me when a protagonist in a horror movie can clearly fight off whatever is chasing them. But for the sake of the horror movie, they've got to act like they're this weak victim that never has a chance in hell to ever fight that thing, But sometimes, unless it's a supernatural, like, force in a horror movie, if it's just, like, people hunting other people in some movies, like, it's such a arbitrary trait to have for the, the people you're supposed to root for. Like, oh, I'm going to hide over here. When you clearly could, like, ambush and, like, knock them over the head. And actually, I think some of the horror movies, if I was to look back, that I like, probably actually have elements of the protagonists fighting back versus just being this person that has to run and hide at all times from the enemy. And in Warhammer, it's like, how much napalm do we need to kill this really ugly, horrifying thing? How many guns do we have to point at this thing until it's dead? How many Grey Knights do we have to throw at that demon before we send it back to the hell it came from? Like, oh look, it's one of the fallen Primarchs. That's certainly terrifying, but can we just get our living Primarch now with the literal sword of the Emperor and Holy Flame to take care of him, please? Like, I just like that there tends to be solutions, and often those solutions aren't perfect, though. It's not like that the Loyalist Space Marines, for example, like, when they charge into battle and fight one of these scary things, they often come out battered and broken, which I also appreciate. Too often in media that I see, the protagonist often dodges any conflict damage. Like, they're shown as too powerful or too good at their job, and like, it gets boring sometimes, And again, I'm going to point to Star Wars kind of being a big problem of this, where a lot of times the protagonists in some of the later movies and in some of the earlier movies too, they don't really take much damage. They just dodge everything. They walk out of a fight with a snarky comment and they're like, haha, I'm the good guy, therefore I'm going to win. Wink, wink. And they might as well wink at the camera at that point. That's not always the case in Star Wars, so don't come at me in the comments. I would say, and I'm going to digress for a second, but I'm going to point out a grand example, which is Luke in the original trilogy. He basically almost dies at the hands of the Emperor at the end. So he definitely took some damage, and I mean, before that, getting his hand lopped off by his father, So I'm not saying that Warhammer has a monopoly on this. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that in a lot of media, Star Wars included, I often see that other example I gave. And that's something I just tend to not like, that I often see Warhammer dodge. Warhammer often has even the most elite troops coming out of a fight with, something broken, something bruised. They gave it their all. And that's what I love. I love when something gives it its all and has, still wins but overcomes, but has the damage as a badge of honor amongst them. Whether they, if they barely make it out, I just appreciate that more. And in a lot of cases, Warhammer tends to lean into that more, and I've always liked that a lot. So those are just a bit of the reasons why I like this universe. I think it's one of the better ones if you like, that over-the-top nature, but also just that it has an honest nature to it, I guess, is my point. It has an honest nature. Like it tells you right up front, humanity's not really the good guys, and, but, you're going to witness some great fights, and, so, you're going to witness a species struggling to fight and give it its all, even if they're not the good guys in it. And I think that's appreciable. Not everything has to be this black and white, super good, super evil, and I kind of like that. Nearly everyone in Warhammer is kind of evil in different shades. I just think that's refreshing, because so much media does not do that. So that's really it. If you like this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We are just over 630 subscribers as of this video, and it would be really cool within the next year to hit 1,000. I would have hit 1,000 this last year, but I took a break from making this content, but I'm going to try to hit this a lot harder now, and I can see that there's some interest growing with this channel again, and so I appreciate the views that you've given it. If you've been here now again and been waiting for me to make more content, I know a couple of you did, and I appreciate each one of you. But I appreciate any of you for giving this small corner of YouTube some of your time. So again, please subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later. Have a great night, day or night, wherever you are. You